Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to tonight's podcast. We are joined by a host of people. Look, the screen is almost full. We almost don't all fit. It's wonderful. So we are joined by three fantastic star guests tonight, and Younger and myself. So we're going to start with introductions and then get to the topic and all that fun stuff. So since I'm going to do it from my screen's perspective, we're going to start with Jack in the corner. Jack, who are you? What do you do? Give us your intro. Promo time. Go.
Woo! Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here. My name is Jack McCarthy. I am the founder and owner of Fantasy Escape Games and Great Team Building, which is our corporate-facing branch. And we do virtual games for corporate groups. So your Google, Meta, Spotify, Twitter, people who work remotely, we come in and force them to have a good time playing a variety of games, a lot of escape rooms. Sometimes we make them do D&D, even though we don't call it that, with them to their face directly. And I also have a design company, so I've designed some immersive experiences in 22 countries around the world. So a lot of escape rooms, some weddings, big parties, theme parks, lots of stuff like that.
Fantastic. All right.
Also, Caleb Bold is in the chat.
I've seen him in the invite. Wahaha. Suzanne, sorry.
That's okay. It's all good. I'm Suzanne Jabour. I'm from Vancouver, Canada. So, an hour slightly different from Alaska. And I am a grief educator. So I teach people about grief so that we can understand it better and then we can support each other better. And I do it, I promise, in a way that doesn't feel heavy and sad and scary. It's really just about information and learning. And I'm super excited for tonight's topic. It's really super juicy.
Juicy. I like that word. We're gonna use that. I might also use moist just to mess with people because that's my favorite way to judge people's
Some people cannot stand. I got a friend of mine that hates that word.
Drives me too. I love that word. I use it all the time.
Describes cake. I don't know why people hate it. The fat boy and me don't get it. All right, Bob. Last but not least.
What's going on? My name is Bob Thompson. I am a motivational speaker. I own whatbobthinks.com. I am also a real estate agent, and years ago, not as often anymore, played a lot of D&D and did a lot of shadow runs back in the day.
Good. See, so we can talk mostly nerdy, as long as we're not keeping our grief counselor too engaged. So
no, I'm nerd adjacent. I'll be fine.
Perfect. See, you use my words. We can be friends. Life is good. So tonight's topic is called Poison in the Water, right? It's dealing with players that have had issues with others in the past. And it was really just going to be about bad GMs or DMs, like the people leading the groups. But I think with the panel of people that we got, being able to talk about those other peoples that affect our lives is going to be just as influential. So we're going to go through family members. We're going to talk about how you're dealing with, just regular people throughout the day, how it translates into the games. Positive ways to deal with those things, dealing with other players that are just being a pain in the butt, and ultimately finishing off with GMs, DMs, people that have really just tainted a game or a system and the experiences that we've had, so on and so forth. So, now that we have the topic and the idea and all the outline stuff figured out, let's start with our very first question, right? So, when I say poison in the water, what does that image draw for you? Just as a base statement, if I tell you the water's poisoned, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? We'll start with Jack again because he's on my left.
Ooh, yeah. I just think of some green liquid that's starting to seep into the pond, and it's not bad enough at first where you're like, that's annoying, but it's probably fine. And then the pond gets greener and greener and greener until it's so green and you've let it fester and it's become a problem. Or at least that's how I imagine poison in the water with a live experience or day to day, where it's poison to me is it seems innocuous at first. Maybe it doesn't seem like it's going to be fine, or it's trying to slip in and then gets worse and worse. And it's hard to catch once it's grown too big or gotten into your system too far.
Fantastic. Okay, good. Suzanne?
Yeah, my image is very similar, except my poison is black. I'm not sure what that says about me. And I'm standing in the water, trying to shove it back. You know how you feel if you smoosh the water hard enough, it will kind of stay away from you. It doesn't work that way. And we'll talk about boundaries, I'm sure, later. But that's what I'm trying to do. I'm in the pond, shoving hard, and it's not working.
Okay, nice. Good visual. I like that. Bob, what about you?
My visual would be, quite honestly, a well, and I'm staying as far away from it as I possibly can. As somebody that's dealt with that type of stuff in the corporate world and leaving jobs and trying to move on to bigger and better things, I find 9 out of 10 times, if you put up that warning sign or give me a heads up, I'm not going to get in the way. I'm not jumping in and save the day. I'm gone. See ya.
Nice. Okay. Younger.
Okay, now that the sirens in the background have stopped,
Gosh darn
so I would
tornadoes.
say, and this time it was ambulances. But I was gonna say basically, you kind of need to address the issue, kind of like what Bob said. Put up some, like, maybe put up the warning signs to make sure that other people don't also like drink the pond. Maybe if you can isolate the issue where it starts, it won't get the chance to further fester itself. It's like, oh, you see it leaking. You generally speaking, like if you're dealing with an actual contaminant, you're gonna like first plug the hole of whatever is leaking or whatever, and then like go cordon off the area, and then like dig up that contaminated soil, or like whatever that sludge liquid is, or wherever the oil spill is, or whatever, like a few feet down, and get all the contaminants, and then do with it, in the most appropriate way possible. And sometimes you got to treat players that way too. Like be like, hey, like maybe this isn't the best
We'll get there.
spot
Don't
for you.
don't jump here. You're reading off my non-existent notes, and you need to stop it. Gosh dang it! That hit every major key point needed. So through our allegory tonight, we're gonna kind of go through that path, right? Spotting the poison, depending on which poison we're talking about, seeing its effects, and we're gonna talk about ways to deal with it, right? The plugging a hole, as Younger said, so it doesn't fester. What festering looks like in each situation, and setting up warning signs. How do you make sure others don't fall for the same trap? How do you fix your water or purify it later, right? Those are kind of the path we're going to go through on each of these categories. So you guys used some really fantastic words. Susan, you used setting up boundaries. Bob, you talked about setting up warning signs. And Jack, you talked about festering, right? And all those things are super, super important for what we're trying to get to, right? And the Younger, you applied it to who we're talking about, which is going to be really apparent, right? We're going to focus a lot harder on players and DMs than other stuff, but taking in account players and GMs' other outside influences that they're also dealing with can also help with your wells. So first and foremost, understanding your well or water source, right? How big is it? How possible is it to contaminate? All that fun stuff, right? So when we're talking about wells and waters and all that fun stuff, a lake, right, is big and open, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. So poisoning it is really hard. It takes a lot of poison to destroy something, right? So if you have a big source of whatever you're dealing with, poisoning the well is a much simpler task. A well is a small protected area that you have to go to get something enjoyable, right? So in this case, a niche service or whatnot, business, right? Your business, right? We're going to talk about this a lot from the business standpoint of things as well. And Bob mentioned the corporate side of things, a wonderful example, right? So our wells are our businesses, right? They're our source of water. They're where people get enjoyment, all that fun stuff. So starting from that section, right? Let me hear about your guys' wells. What do you guys have protected? How do you draw water? And this is just jargon here. From your wells, how do you guys all individually do that? What do you set up to make sure that it isn't an open thing, something that's easy to poison? How do you protect yourselves as a business person?
All right, I guess I'll start if that's okay.
Perfect.
My attitude is I use what I call emotional capital, which basically means there are very few things in this world that I'm going to get wound up about that I cannot control. So I'm just going to stay away from it, because let's be honest, I got better things to do with my time than get on Facebook and Twitter and bark about this and complain about that. Regardless of politics, religion, or anything else, nobody's going to be convinced of my opinion anyway, 9 out of 10 times. And I've just got better things to do with my time. So I try not to worry about that sort of outside noise. I focus on the task at hand, or the client, or my loved ones and family and all of that, and just block out 90% of the whatnot that goes on in the world. I mean, it works for me. I'm going to put my head down and do my job at the end of the day and take care of my people.
Bob, you sound like a water truck. You're not a well, you're a water truck. And I like that. All right, Suzanne, you're next on the list. What about you? How do you form your well or your water source? What kind of water source are you working with?
Yeah, that's so interesting, and I am, like, bombarded by images, and I'm not sure, like, I'm definitely not a water truck, I'm not insulated, I'm definitely I don't even think I think I'm a bit of a river, to be honest. I
A
think it's a
river.
little bit rivery.
Okay. All
As
right. All
for
right.
me, it's a lot about, what's happening, how much, as Bob is saying, like, how much control do I actually have over it? Very little, great. On you flow. Like, because I don't get to pick what happens, what's coming at me. I get to pick how I respond to it. Right. So it's about, okay, I can just let that flow by. And this is, a lifelong journey to figure these things out and to not get, bombarded with, the people pleasing and the, rising to people's expectations and being the good girl. And I'm a middle child. Like I am raised to be the keeper and the
Middle
moderator.
child.
And like, right. It's brutal. That middle child thing. It's brutal.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a lot of that. It's now I'm very much about, I have something going on actually in my life right now that I have no control over, and these two things might literally collide against each other. And I'm just like, I got no stake in this game. I'm just gonna eat my popcorn and see what happens. Like there's nothing I can do about it.
Solid choice. Eating popcorn is always a good decision.
Always good.
Jack, how about you? What kind of water source do you command?
Yeah, I was trying to think. I think I'm somewhere in between. So the image I'm going to give is a castle with a moat around it, in the
Mhm.
sense that a lot of times I was thinking about this for hiring or for, sometimes I get client if that's somebody you're hiring and bringing into your business, or if that's somebody you're inviting to your game table, or if that's a client, and sometimes we have to fire our clients too. That sometimes there's guards at the gate trying to do a certain like a quick look, and then, but sometimes people get in who you don't want in, but you're also allowed to say how long they're allowed to be in there. So if you let somebody in, that doesn't mean they have to live there. It doesn't mean they have to live with you. Maybe you do a one-shot test, and then you move on to your game, as the other metaphor that's coming to mind. But it's a gated process, and then at the end of the night, we sweep anybody who doesn't belong here, who we don't want to stay, sweep all the spies, all the assassins out, and close up for the night. To use my medieval castle metaphor, that's where my mind started
I
to
I
go.
I love that. That's great. Younger. What about you? What's our business's water source? Would you say?
I would go so far as to say that our business's water source is more like an ocean. The fact is that people all around the world are constantly doing things to, improve it here and there. Like, oh yeah, we'll pick up the pollution, whatever. Other places, there's raging infernos of oil. And so it's really our job is to basically kind of like coast around like the coast around the ocean till we can get to a spot that's harvestable for whatever, whether it's a desalination plant or, oh yeah, that area of the ocean died because of an oil spill, so our fish aren't going to be there anymore, we got to go somewhere else.
That is a solid metaphor, and I really do like that. It's a little big for my taste, but I'll take it.
Hey, the world, there's bigger fish in the sea, they say, right?
Right,
you know
exactly. I like that. That's a good outlook. See, this is why this man's the business partner. So now that we all have our kind of ideas of how we've built our own personal water sources, right? How we keep our clients, how we build our communities, all that fun stuff. The next bit is dealing with the people that come to our well, right? And first and foremost, we're going to talk about the people that aren't actually in the well, the ones that tell that are interested but not there, or the ones that are pushing the people along the path that are coming to us, right? So we're going to talk about the outside influences of the people connecting to our wells, right? So in your guys' businesses, how important is the outside community to your clients, right? Like, how much do you think the outside people affect your potential water, right? Because the water is the people that you're with, right? I'll give you 10 seconds
I
to think, and we're going to start with Jack
I
because he
can start
spoke
off.
first. Wahaha.
Oh,
I think a lot. I think as far as there's a sense of reputation cost too, of like what gets around town, and that's poisoning what other people think of you or enhancing what other people think of you, even if that's separate from you. At least for me, I know that having that reputation, like that sense of reputation, well, where people are first learning about you, is pretty important, as well as a lot of the people we work with, they get referred or they get passed along to us through a sales agent or somebody else they're not directly associated with us, but they're further upstream kind of coming down. So I think it's super important, and we don't have a lot of necessary control over what we pass upstream. So we just have to do the best we can down here, and then anything that whatever gets to us, redirect it as quickly as we can, to use that metaphor. But that's the first thought that comes to my mind.
Interesting. Okay, I like that. Bob, what about you?
So I think for me, the way I keep my well clean as possible, or my water truck in this case, is I come across with complete and straight, blunt honesty, and that seems to work because everybody knows what they're getting when they're coming into my space. They're going to know this is what I'm doing and this is why, and I'm going to run with that. And if that's not what you want, well, then I'm not for you. Whether it's real estate, whether it's motivation, whether it's consulting, whatever it may be, this is what I'm going to do, and that's the end of it. And if that's not your cup of tea and you want something bad in your water, well, you're not getting it out of my truck. You can go down the street and go find somebody else's well to dig into, because I'm not doing that.
Nice. Okay, I like that. It's a good attitude.
I like that one.
Suzanne?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think there's a huge impact for me because I'm really pushing the envelope and talking about a topic people don't want to talk about. So it doesn't take very much, within an organization or within a conversation for there to be, for the person I'm talking to completely understand what I'm talking about, usually because they're in the midst of it or they're supporting someone who's in the midst of it. And then you get one person outside of that or one person up the chain from them that's like, oh, nope, scary, not doing that. They run screaming for the hills. And I'm also with Bob. Like, I get it. Those of us that are I think all of us are in these kind of fields where we are for certain people. I think this is true of all of us on the planet. There's 8 billion of us. We don't have to be for everybody. Not everybody's going to get what I'm up to. Not everybody's going to care what I'm up to. And not everybody's ready for what I'm up to. And I think that's probably the same for all of us. And that's okay with me. Like, I get it. And that's okay. I don't have to be for everybody. Not everyone is invited to float along the river with me. It's okay. You can go on that river. There's a lake over there. There's some ocean I heard about. Like, there's plenty of opportunities. And I think that's really important for us to understand, especially if we're change makers, especially if we're disrupting something or doing something different and new. We're not going to be for everybody. And that's okay.
Solid. I like that. Younger, last but not least.
I have some. I know that I'm ruining this by like using water as like a part of it, but I'm talking about fishing.
How dare you?
No.
Your metaphors are goof. Stop it. No, go ahead. Listening.
The real circumstances is like the external forces that attribute to like our business's success and such. Like, how much impact do they have on the business? I would say that like if we're talking about like the consumer of our products or services, like that the majority of them would be considered outside of like our typical area of operations of our sea vessels, like right at the port. We have our little, like you have a dock on the port, city, and like you send your boats out, and just like Bob and Susan were saying, like not everybody is into what you're going for. Well, if I'm like fishing for salmon, it's going to be a different bait than it's going to be if I'm fishing for halibut. I might use a different lure or a hook or something to that effect. I'll have different equipment, a different boat, all sorts of stuff, to hit that target audience. And like if you want to get the bigger fish, you got to go out further, which means you might need a little bit more support in regards to being able to venture to get to that point. So you might have to start off small with a little rowboat at your little dinghy dock, and then eventually get a speedboat. Eventually have to get your speedboat, go get a big old fishing vessel or whatever it may be. You just gotta but the external factors, like we love the people of the community in our community and such, but a lot of the revenue comes from actually going and putting our face out there at an event or something to go and get these people's. They have to see you to want to come and bite it.
It's fair. I also like the ocean metaphor because most of the time we're not the ones spilling oil. If there's a contaminated area, it's not the rowboat's fault. We're just out here fishing, doing our thing. But that doesn't stop big bad company 7,000 miles away for using AI art, which makes people angry. I mean, we use AI art, but that our people that are with us again, they're cool with that. That's fine. But larger communities might get totally poisoned or disillusioned from eating. We'll go back to we'll say tuna, right? An oil spill goofs up tuna populations. Well, no one wants to deal with tuna because it's been poisoned, even if our tuna isn't poisoned. You know what I mean? So there is a lot of outside influence, and a lot of it isn't even like the people right next to the ones we're talking about. It is people very far away that affect huge portions of our ocean, which is interesting to say the least. Again, I like the ocean metaphor. It's easy to work with. So jumping on to the next bit, right? So we all have our little vigils. We all have those people on the outside and how they affect our communities and our businesses. What about a little bit more personal? So when you are dealing with your actual water itself, how do you make sure it's pure, right? How are you making sure that you have the highest quality water, or does the water quality not really matter for what you're doing? Is it your
I
job
think
to make it better?
I think if I'm dealing within my, let's say, my own household or my own structure, whatever you want to call it, my own little personal rowboat, whoever I'm rowing that boat with has got to be solid and got to be helping along the way and doing their part, because otherwise we're going to spin around in a circle and we're not going to get anywhere. We're just
Okay.
not. So I think that's super important, whether it's an editor, whether it's a spouse, a whatever the case may be. That's important. You've got to have people within that boat that you can rely on. And if you can't, you got to get your own boat, or you got to make somebody walk the plank, as it is, one or the other.
You are in the back of the boat. You don't touch the oars. Get out of here. All right. I
Yeah,
like it. Okay. Suzanne.
yeah. I just that one it just for me is that's everything. Like it's 100% my job to keep the water clean. 100%. I'm responsible for my water. We're each responsible for our water. My river flows into your ocean, and if my river is contaminated, then the ocean is messed up, and what the water truck is sucking up is a mess, and the moat is full of algae and crap, right? Like it's so much each of our individual responsibilities to keep that water clean, and part of why I think that's not working right now very well is that we're so shut down emotionally and we're so scared and there's so much stuff going on that's just overwhelming. And I think that part of how we keep it clean is just by being really vulnerable and honest and saying what's true and having communication. I don't know when we forgot how to communicate with each other and have conversation. I don't understand when that happened. I missed that abrupt transition to where having a difference of opinion meant we couldn't even talk to each other. I don't know how we recover from that, because that's how we keep the water clean. It's by having conversation, trying to understand and connecting on a human to human level. And if we can't figure that out, we're in big trouble.
I gotta touch on this because we're going to talk about festering in a second anyway. So Jack, don't worry, we'll get back to you in a second. But I really want to focus on this because this is a very very important part of this conversation that we're having, right?
I was about to piggyback on the same thing, so
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, good. So to the festering water, right? How do we make it clean? Going back to Bob's original philosophy, right? He's got to run a water truck, so being honest and straightforward and telling you exactly what's in there is going to be the first step, right? Open, honest communication, even if you don't necessarily agree with it, is the easiest way to understand what you are dealing with, right? Knowing whether the water has chlorine or if it's natural is a huge part of what you're selling or taking out of it, right? If you put iodine in the water, or if there's a possibility of you getting sick from drinking it. We as a company talk about setting expectations a lot, right? A lot of how we deal with things on both the corporate level when we're working with businesses, comparatively to the in-person stuff, or I should say the individual, the household, whatever version, when we're not dealing with companies, when we're dealing with just groups of families and whatnot. Figuring out what the expectations of everyone that is playing and doing stuff is probably the single most important thing to understand. So knowing the type of water that is expected and that you have is going to push forward, right? Suzanne, grief counseling is great, but if I am dealing with more PTSD or something like that, right? Where it's because of previous violence onto others, and I'm getting through that struggle, right? I'm probably not going to need your brand of water at the start, right? Until I get to the point where I realize that trauma is probably actually grief, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that grief is the answer to every question, but yeah,
Okay.
but there are aspects of PTSD that you maybe need to deal with to get to what the underlying trauma even is, right? And all
Right.
trauma brings grief. Not all grief has trauma, but all trauma has grief. So yes, there's going to be a grief component to that, and I agree. Like sometimes you need salt water, and sometimes you need fresh, and sometimes you need chlorinated because other people are swimming in it, and so I think it is important for us to understand, what are we offering, what do people need, and where is the match of those two.
Nice. Now,
and ultimately, I think to Suzanne's point, grief typically may not be the first spot in the walk, but it's probably going to be at the end. Typically, you're going to deal with, let's say, anger first because you are irritated and angry with whatever has happened in your world, but eventually you are going to have to grieve the loss of whatever was taken from you or relationship or whatever the case may be. So you're going to end up in the grief category sooner or later. It may be a little bit later, but she's going to be there when you land.
Nice. Jack, you sounded like you had some add-on points to this, so feel free.
Yeah. No, it's just always been really interesting, and I second it. And I was thinking about the communication thing and how critical that piece is, because a lot of times when I think of poison, you don't know if it's gotten in, and sometimes you start to notice it. At what point do you even start to notice it? Sometimes you can't, as well as you can try to catch it right away, you might not be able to. And sometimes, I think of a lot of like employees or friends, and something goes sour or something starts to turn. Is it them? What's going on here? Are they misinformed? And trying to get really clear is how I keep my water clear, is like, can we get really clear on what you're actually thinking, why you're actually acting this way? Why is it bothering me? Maybe you don't even know it's bothering me. Maybe you don't know we're aligned. And figuring out, hey, is this, you're dumping in chlorine here because you thought I wanted it when actually I have a saltwater pool, or whatever the issue is. Maybe you think you're actually being helpful and it's not. But a lot of the poison maybe is, we see it immediately as a malintended thing, and maybe it is, and that needs to be resolved and clarified. But maybe it's something that's surfaced for other reasons, that nobody's necessarily gone in to your group or wanted to be your friend with the malicious intention of hurting you, so much as it's happened for some other things that have not mixed, and that's caused this chemical reaction that now we're recognizing as poison. And so I think communication is like up front, but also once somebody's already in and you're going, that's a constant ongoing process. It's never something you can just turn off or assume you're on the same page about. And I think that's where it'll get lost or get poisoned, is when we get complacent with our communication with who's in our well and who's in our space.
Right. Younger, how do you make mustard gas?
With a little bit of chlorine
And
some just a sec. I don't remember.
It's a cleaning supply. It's a cleaning supply. You got this.
Bleach. There we go.
There you go. Right.
It took me a minute. I was trying to figure the word, and I was like, "Oh, what is it?"
There's been a
bleach
lot of
and ammonia.
Yeah, just a little bit of cleaning supplies mixed together, right? Two things that are supposed to work really well. Don't mix them. You die.
Yeah, I had a friend accidentally, try to clean up a bathroom once with it, and there was some ammonia in there.
Yeah.
And,
someone peed on the floor, bleached it. Bad choice.
Oh my gosh.
Outside of that note, I really like what a few of you hit on a little bit, but especially Jack, and it was identifying like what the overall purpose is, like in regards to the water itself. Like you said, like there could be somebody who's like, this is a saltwater pool, and then somebody's like, oh well, I got some chlorine because you said you needed your pool clean or whatever, and it's like, that's a perfect example. Or like, just like if you have a different purpose, like the guy who's raising orcas, at like Sealand or whatever, like needs salt water. He doesn't need fresh water. The fish will die if there's just fresh water or something in there.
And then another fish needs that. Like one fish's poison is another fish's air.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And that's a good point. I think it also that bleeds back into the reasoning why you're doing it, which also involves where you come from, your age, and things of that nature. For me, at almost 52, saltwater pools didn't exist 20 years ago. Everything was chlorine. So you also have to factor that in. If you're concerned that somebody is poisoning your well and they're not necessarily doing it on purpose, well, then why, or what is their thought process? And it's probably going to be different as opposed to somebody that's 23 compared to somebody that's 53, because they look at things a little bit differently. They may be looking at it wrong, but they may not realize it's wrong until you have that conversation and figure it out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how many people knew that saltwater pools were an option? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Okay, I swam in saltwater pools as a kid, so I don't know where you all are from, but we've had them here forever.
Well,
where are
here
you
in
from?
Virginia,
Yeah.
they didn't exist.
I mean, I live on the ocean. We have saltwater pools. Like the pools
I didn't know anybody with
pools.
Everybody that I knew that had a pool, it was always chlorine growing up.
Yeah, we've always had.
So it all depends.
But again, to your point, there you go. Some people have them in different areas, and some people didn't. So they're going to come at it a little bit differently the way they handle it.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I was thinking about it when Jack was talking too about really understanding people's intentions, and I think if we can start the sort of understanding that in any given moment, the vast majority of us are doing the best we know how with what we've been given, that shifts a lot. If we can, step out of judgment and out of our assumptions and just have our assumption be that, this maybe isn't my person, but they're doing the best they know how. And either that meshes with me or it doesn't, but that can be a no harm, no foul conversation. It doesn't have to make them wrong and me right or any of that.
Yeah, totally. I had a player in a game be like, really, I was just like, what is up? Like, do they hate this game I'm running for them? And it turns out they texted me afterwards, sorry, if I was being a little rude, my pet just died. And I was like, oh, okay. We have some context to what's going on here. And then I wish I only knew sooner, then we could have actually changed the course of our event that night to accommodate that better.
Yep. So again, going back to setting expectations and understandings is probably the single most important thing for us as business owners and leaders in our communities to focus on, right? Is excuse the small children running around in the background there. Setting those expectations is priority number one, right? And the best thing about setting expectations is as long as you have an open communication, those expectations can change, right? To focus in on TTRPG stuff, right? If you're playing a game that's super heavy combat where you're rolling on dice all the time, you're fighting the orcs, you're leveling up, you're getting all the cool powers, but you don't ever get to just talk to the people, and that's what one of the characters wants or needs. Or they're just tired of killing orcs and they want to murder something else for a while. Like them being able to sit down and talk to you and push forward with what they want, right? So you know what to expect and can adjust fire and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, not every business can do that, right? Sometimes you sell pencils and pencils are what you sell. If they want pens, go to a different company. And it's okay to be like, hey, I sell pencils. Go to Bob's Burgers. They have pens, which is weird because why does Bob have burgers and pens? But whatever.
Apparently, he doesn't sell burgers very well.
They have a burger topper. It's all good.
I'm just saying the cosmonauts used pencils in space, and we spent millions on developing space working pens. So,
because we could.
Welcome to America.
Welcome to
America. So while Rook was talking and putting this metaphor together, which he did really well, in the back of my mind, I had the World of Warcraft YouTube clip with Leroy Jenkins going on. So you've got all these people that are planning and they're putting a strategy together. They're all going to work together. And there's this one guy that just decides he's going to blow everything all to hell and just be literally Leroy Jenkins and go at it. So that's kind of what it made me think about, how you can strategize and plan all you want, but you got to make sure everybody's on the same page ultimately.
Right.
That's the poison.
Right. Yeah. Leroy was the poison that got everyone murdered. That was a terrible clip if you watch it. Hilarious. Still the funniest thing out there. But let's I'm gonna shift us forward into that discussion with dealing with players that have ruined games for other people, right? For their own enjoyment, because they don't understand what they're doing, because they don't have the patience to do what the rest of the people are doing, right? Leroy Jenkins is a wonderful caricature to use that, because that is the, hey, we're doing all this math, we're trying to figure it out, we're going to do this plan, and everyone has their thing, and then the warrior just ran off to go punch something in the face because that's what they did, and everyone died because he messed all the plans up, didn't do what he was told, We as role players, right, the TTRPG people, and probably Jack pretty often with his stuff, um, deal with people that just don't understand what they are comprehending or what's expected of them. Um, so making sure that that part is set up ahead of time, right? If you have one of those poisonous players that are just they want to hit things, they want to do stuff constantly, they can't sit still, or they are on their phones, like if they're not doing something, this is in their face, so you can't talk to them. Yeah, right, exactly. We got rules for that. But which I'll give a hint afterward or a suggestion for that later. But knowing that you have those people at your table, right? Uh, you have to spotlight them, right? The first thing and foremost when those people are at your table and you know you have them, is you have to give them attention, right? You cannot let them fester. If you let them fester, they make things way worse, right? Whether that's giving them some kind of special side thing where they roll dice or tap their pin or something like that and has some silly effect in the game. It doesn't really have to do anything, but if it gives them something extra, like every time you write a a spell incantation all the way out, you get an extra spell slot back for your character, right? Something that'll keep them busy so they have something to do while everyone is role playing or things like that. If they count to 100 sheep, they get a gold coin, whatever, right? It doesn't necessarily have to equate to much, but if you can keep them entertained and busy, you will reduce their damage that they can cause on the rest of the group. It does take a little bit of forward thinking to make sure that, hey, I have something prepared for them. This is something they can do. But it is a way to avoid that kind of poisonous person. So let's talk about the other poisonous players or poisonous people that you guys deal with in your guys' works, and I'll come back with a couple other examples or a little younger talk about them. But starting with Suzanne. Suzanne, what's a poison that you look out for, like in the people that you work with?
Oh my gosh. So I am fascinated by this whole conversation because first of all, I would have set up the expectations before the game started, and if you're behaving like
Thank
that,
you.
then you're voted out of the game. But there you go.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna interrupt you here. Sometimes you want to play with those people to get them introduced, um, because it's
I
their
get
first
that.
time, or they're a kid, right? Kids are notorious for it. They got the 12-year-old brother, sister, son that wants to play along with the rest of the family, and they're just a little hyperactive, right? So giving them a
No,
little
I
extra
get that.
attention is a way to
Okay,
do
that
it. But
makes
anyway,
sense. I thought you were talking about grown-ups because
oh,
that's a whole different ball.
it can also be grown-ups, to be
Oh,
fair,
there's
but a
grown-ups that
lot
behave
of the
just like
time, a lot of the time, it's those
Well,
kids.
again, I'm not letting if I know that you're going to disrupt from Jump Street, or you want to jump in the middle. Like for myself, when my friends are playing, if they're in the middle of, let's say, a run of doing certain things, or then I'm going to stay out of the way and not join them until that run is done, and then I'll jump in with a character when we're all kind of restarting, or we've picked a new focal point of what we're going to do, because it's just the right thing to do. Is I'm not jumping in week 6 of a 12-week campaign, whether I want to or not. And I appreciate the fact that they don't mind, but I am going to end up disrupting it. And it's better off for me to just wait till they're done, and then I can jump into the next thing.
Interesting. Okay. I know for our philosophy, company wise, we always invite people in whenever they can, right? We always want people to join if they're able. But that's just
That's
us.
And I think with adults and children alike, and those of us that focus well, those of us that get distracted, those of us that are doing whatever we're doing, whatever's going on for us in any given moment. I really think that it's super important to have sort of a set of shared agreements like around this table. And some of you said, oh yeah, we have a rule for that. We're not all doing this when it's not our turn to roll or whatever it is. Like there needs to be a set of shared agreements and a way that we carry ourselves in this space, because then if someone's not doing, this is part of how you keep that poison out of the well. If someone's not doing that, then you get to say, well, we all agreed that this is how we're going to behave. And so if you're able to do that, great. If you're not able to do that, let's talk about whether we can accommodate you or not. And then we shift the shared agreements. But if we're not starting from a point of understanding what the expectations are, then your bucket is full of holes and your water is
Nice.
a mess. That water
Nice.
metaphor kind of went backwards because somehow the poison is coming in the holes, but the water's going out. I don't know. You know what I meant.
We get you. We get you. But jumping back to focus on more of your stuff, like on a personal level, what do you look for?
I'm all about honesty and vulnerability.
Okay, so
Like
if someone is holding something back, that's an instant red flag and no go for you. They don't get
a
to sit at your
huge red
table.
flag for me. Like you're not invited to the table. For me too, it's about our ability to listen and especially to listen when the conversation is difficult or messy or uncomfortable, and not have to jump in and fix it or jump in with judgment. Because our go-tos tend to be fix it or judge it. We don't want to just sit with it, especially if it's messy, right? We want to clean it up, put it in a little box, put it away. Grief doesn't work like that. Most things don't work like that. Grief especially doesn't. So that to me is critical. And if you don't have that skill set, I'm happy to help you develop it. And if you're not interested in developing it, I'm not your person.
That's a fair statement. I like that. Bob, what about you? When you're in your realm, in your kingdom of the water truck, what is your like red flag, no go person that you're like, if I see them, I know they're poison instantaneous?
I think it's a lot of times it's people that are very short-term thinkers and they don't see the big picture and they don't understand that there's a process that has to be done. My example of that would be, okay, well, we're getting ready to put a book and a course out, and then the original thought process for other people that are trying to come in are like, well, we need to sell it now. We need to do it this way. We need to do it this way. Why are you giving a piece of this away, or why are you doing what you're doing? And they don't understand that at the end of the day, you want a long-term greater good coming out of what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish, to where it's not, okay, well, I want all of the nickels and dimes now. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing good work and helping people, the nickel and dimes will eventually add up, because let's be honest, we can't do what we do and not get paid. Those are facts, whether we like that or not. Otherwise, I'll just go get a job at Walmart. But the point is, we've got to think. I want long-term thinkers surrounding me all of the time. I don't want anybody that's in it for the quick buck, or the quick, they're going to get their 15 minutes of satisfaction and walk out the door. That doesn't work. I don't want to work with people like that. It just doesn't.
Nice. Okay. Good.
Team players.
Long-term thinkers. That's a solid one. Jack, what about you?
Yeah, I think to some level it depends on what kind of table am I setting up. Is this a table where I'm hiring a game host? Am I bringing friends along? And those qualities may be different, or even,
Right.
in what situation am I hanging out with different friends, and I'll invite some to other things.
So,
but I think in general across the board,
I'm going to redirect you really quick before you give me a generalized statement. In your company, when you're hiring someone, so let's say this is someone that you are going to trust and work with, what is that you were just like, no, instantaneously throws up your flags?
Yeah, the two that immediately come to mind are our two core values, which are integrity and then collaboration. Integrity, I think, hopefully goes without saying, although I know it doesn't. I think collaboration, for me, that's somebody who's willing to have their idea be the center of attention, and also still willing to contribute ideas. And we're in a very creative space, so being comfortable in that creative space and being willing to contribute and collaborate and not be super attached or unwilling to help somebody else out, in a creative mindset, and being willing to explore and change on that. And I think that's very niche to what I do specifically, where we're building games and we're building events and we're helping people get up and have fun. And we really need that collaborative, open, and with that is communication too. I call it collaboration, but really is just about somebody who's willing to communicate and be open about it.
Well, I mean, so to tag onto that, right? And again, this is a TTRPG thing. If you have someone with what we call main character energy, right? The anime MC has to be the most important person in the room. The standalone rogue that's always running off on their own and not doing things with other people. Like that is one of our, get your stuff together. It's cool to be a rogue. It's cool to be standoffish from time to time, but like you're building a story together with people. So you playing by yourself while the other people are sitting at the table watching you do things is not fun for people, right? Because it's a community thing. It is a collaborative event. You're telling stories together. It's not about Dark Raven, the super emo, those kind of things. Jagger, I know I'm talking about this, but what's another one that we run into pretty often?
Okay, so I think we all hit on it. I think everybody's just beating around the bush. It all comes down to, like, even in my personal life, like, I don't really want to deal with people who are just outright, like, selfish. Like, if you don't value my time, then, like, why would I want to play with you, like, or do business with you, or anything within that regard? Like, it's okay to, like, care about yourself and, like, take care of your stuff. But if it's like to the detriment of other people, that's where it's then like, oh, you're like, oh, it's all about me on my turn, but then you're also like taking away from them on theirs. That's where it's like, Like you
No,
gotta
that's a
gotta
good
have a
point
balance.
because they're going to drop you as soon as the next shiny object comes along.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just I don't like dealing with people who are selfish. Like I want them to either like be invested like into the person like on a humanitarian standpoint. Like oh care about me as I am, or like be like oh like even people who are just like oh man I'm sorry like I did that. Like that's at least showing like some form of like compassion. But like people who are just like nah.
I feel you. So going back to our phone conversation, right? When this thing pops up at the table, that I think that falls into pretty much all of these categories, right? If we're talking about long-term players, the ones that just play on their turn, right, and then they go back to their phone and listen to memes and are selfish with the noise in the room, or they're not paying attention to what's going on in the story. They're not collaborating because they did their thing and then they're done. Um, all those things feed together to make something terrible. Phones are the easiest example because it's something that we all have access to 99% of the time, right? And for those of you that are playing the games and have to deal with this, especially for online people where the phone is right there, they might be using it for character stuff, but a lot of times they might be looking up memes because that's how we be these days. Um, you can tell people they only have so much screen time like for the thing, right? You can ask them questions and engage them. um it can be really hard to spotlight people all the time and go back to, but if you make sure that you're interacting from time to time, even just a hey how you doing, what are you doing next, get them thinking and operating and moving and grooving, so when it is their turn they're not spending 20 minutes looking through their spell list, or they have an excuse for looking at their phone to look at their spell list for what the heck they're doing the next turn, right? Like give them a purpose for their phone. Those
All
are
goes
two.
back to expectations,
Right. Yep. Yep.
like
Yep.
setting those expectations. I I'm sorry to interrupt you
No.
on
No.
this, but like I mean, there's even you also got to like see the difference between a lot of people who are selfish will have their characters do a selfish action like in the game in response to like that's how they are as a person, but that doesn't always directly correlate to the character doing something selfish, meaning the players are selfish themselves. Like I'm a perfect example of this. Like 2 sessions ago in a D&D campaign, I did something in character like that I was like, oh man, like that was a total jerk move, like in real life after I did it to another player. And I was like, and after the session, I was like, dude, I'm sorry. Like I didn't even think about how that would impact you in that moment. I just want you to know, like from a personal standpoint, like I'm sorry, I'll try to do better with that. Like if there's any way that, to mitigate that like outside of the game to, manage the like even though it wasn't a conflict, like manage the situation so it didn't escalate having someone's feelings hurt or whatever because like I did something that was jerkwadish.
Yeah. But you're catching it before it festers
Right.
and communicating and calling it out right away.
So I'm going to shift the forward because we're getting close on time to the last subject, which is GMs, leaders, upper management, all those people that can affect how we're doing things. Right. Us, the people that are running the things or running the shows, and our peers that did similar things to us, right? For our gaming yahoos, we all know that there's plenty of GMs and DMs out there that have terrible rules or they don't follow rules or do stuff completely different than we do them. And you will catch players that will come from those tables and bring things that we don't like to our environment, right? They've been using chlorine and we are a saltwater pool. Um, Again, a great metaphor for that one. Um, so how do you guys uh what are some of those things for your guys' industries that you guys catch on the regular? Like like something that like you hear about another GM, DM, grief counselor, speaker that have done things that are just like that's bad, I don't like this, and this is how I fix it. I'm
All
actually
right.
okay.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. All right, I'll go. Ha ha ha. Just because I like to talk every once in a while. Ha. My biggest one that I've had recently that has probably pissed me off the most is I have met several female players that like don't like to play in male groups. Like they can't stand it. It's like their least favorite thing to do because the last 3 times they've tried, their GMs have just been trash tier jerks specifically to their characters. Like just cannot deal with them. They didn't deal with players being appropriate with stuff, and they just like push them away, right? anytime I hear a GM that pushes their players away for a not good reason, that's obviously the player's fault. It's one of those things where like you have to do cleanup. You have to show them like this is the good thing. There are good people. I promise. Look, continue doing the hobby because if you don't, you're gonna be sad. And so that's one of mine, right? The ones that can't treat female players with I don't even know what the right term is.
Respect.
Well, I mean respect. Yeah,
Dignity.
like, yeah. All of those things apply there. So
for me, day to day, I see a lot of groups where sometimes it becomes very clear their manager doesn't really listen to the whole team, but the manager makes the decision and everybody else is like, what do you all think? No time to answer. Okay, we're doing my thing. And so working this space where we give them challenges where they have to collaborate and talk together, or being able to separate. Again, this will require some forethought, but I think if you're able to see like, hey, this is the problem they've had before. How can I set up how I'm presenting myself or how I'm going to set up my table in order to force the opposite to happen? And that also signals to other people like, hey, I know you've experienced that in the past. Look at me setting this up with this other intention in mind, and your actions are backing up your words. So they know also coming in that they're not going to come from a place of just expecting the same thing to happen. If you can set it up saying, hey, this is going to be different. This is how we're going to make it different. And then follow through on that. I know that's kind of general, but I think
follow through is very important, right? You can say all the prettiest words in the world. If you don't follow through, it doesn't mean anything.
Can I hit on that?
Of course.
Okay, so first, Jack, I your explanation of that initial like situation was something that I dealt with on the regular at my old job, and so I really appreciate mentioning like, no, we're just gonna do it this way. Like, yeah, like you could say whatever, but at the end of the day, it's gonna be this way. And like sometimes there are rules and reasons for that thing, that are valid, and there's just not time to address a situation, right? But like especially like in games, like it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a good time for the players. Like you should at least take the time to hear what they have to say, have an after action review, make adjustments here and there if you can. And it's funny because it all goes back to setting that expectation. Like if you're running a campaign and you're like, hey guys, this is the like give them an overlay of like, hey, this is like the situation and like where I see it going. Right. And then the players might like willingly like pursue like, oh yeah, we have to go defeat the demon lord rather than, oh no, we're definitely looking for that sea kraken over in that other.
Don't bring up sea krakens. You're going to traumatize the viewers.
And so it's just like setting that expectation and being like, just communication, like regular communication, like, hey, this is like I set up this campaign. The campaign was set up to be run like Curse of Strahd, not Mythic Odyssey of Theros or whatever. Like just literally setting the expectation and being like, so you have the whole game at your hands. Just this is the situation.
And I think there's something through that also I think Bob was kind of hitting on too, which is like, and sticking to your guns on that one, or like if I had a group of 5 players who all wanted to go do the individual thing, and it wasn't like we're playing together. And I said, okay, you're now in a city where an assassin group is after you. If you go off by yourself, you will get found and murdered. And one of them tried to go and leave and do something on themselves, and lo and behold, an assassin found them and they almost died. And then they all stayed together the rest of the campaign. They were afraid they were going to die. And so that was me holding my stick tactic. But if the point of the story is if you follow through on like, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're doing, and this is the consequence if you don't want to, then they could have chose to get up away from the team and leave if that's not the game they wanted to play. None of them did. But I think that having that expectation, then holding the follow through, and the stick is maybe a mean way to say it, but lovingly supporting the expectation of this is what we're doing.
That's the Halo 3 multiplayer.
No, it's always walk around carrying a big stick.
To follow up Jack's point in terms of cooperation and things of that nature, I think that's one of the fascinating things that came out of COVID, to where if you were in an office, you were no longer judged on if you were the most popular kid in the classroom. You were judged by your work output and things that you were doing, because a lot of times the quiet person that's doing most of the work gets overlooked because they don't know how to hang out and talk to the boss and be the cool guy in the room and whatever the case may be. So when COVID came in and kind of took all of that office interaction away, it gave an opportunity to people that, let's be honest, maybe were a lot quieter and were introverts, but yet were putting out better and more consistent work compared to their counterparts that could be super loud and could get along with anybody. And I think that actually probably helped a whole lot of people, and hopefully maybe made people think a little bit differently, that it's not about perhaps the loudest guy in the room. It's about who's getting what done at the end of the day, or is able to cooperate with their coworkers, even though they're not seeing them on a regular basis.
Nice. Suzanne, jump in.
Yeah, I just was going to jump in. The thing that came up for me sort of as you were all talking that I think is kind of the through theme is it's about being a disruptor. And I'm very clear. I'm here to talk about grief in a way that you've never talked about grief before. I'm here to disrupt your expectations. And I think whether you're explicitly saying it, for example, to the female players, where you're going to say, oh, well, I want to disrupt your expectations because we don't operate like that here. This is how we operate. Please come and give us a try. Or you're, quietly, as Jack is doing, setting it up either with the stick in the game or setting it up with the team at the corporate space where you're just going to set it up so that that manager can't behave the way that they normally behave. It's about disrupting that norm, either explicitly, subtly, with a stick or a carrot. I don't care how you do it. It is that sense of, you're coming in with this expectation, either set up a shared agreement about it, we have an open conversation about it, or we just come in and say, yeah, that's not how we do it here. Come and try and see what happens. Like, give us a chance to prove ourselves. And I think that that's really interesting when we're talking about, everything it is about that sense of people coming with their expectations, coming with what their lived experience, and us being able as leaders to say, oh yeah, and let's say something. I'm really, I'd love for you to say to those female players, oh my gosh, that makes me so angry. Like, I was on a podcast talking about how this makes me angry, and I'm angry for you. I'm angry for us because we're losing female players, all the things. And so I'm purposefully creating a space where it's safe for you to be here. Please come and try whatever it is. We can address it out loud. We can just, subtly do it in the background and everybody knows what's happening except probably the manager that was the problem in the first place. And I just think it's kind of fun to play with that disruptor identity as we, go about making the world a better place.
Susan, I have to hit on some of that. Like, I love how you just, I don't know, something you said just clicked in my head. You just perfectly laid out the situation, like, of the entire conversation of what we just talked about. It's as simple as, like, having that, like, set expectation and then communication, follow-up communication through that, to, like, make sure that things are staying on track. But also doing it with, like, a mutual level of respect, because if you, like, lose the respect, that's where a lot of the infighting is going to start between, people who are working together or playing at the same table, is, like, once that respect level has dropped, for whatever reason. And so being able to, like, go and mitigate that, in whatever way and address the situation early, or, like, make amends after, so on and so forth. You could be able to, like a lot of times when players have problems with other players or players have a problem with the DM, those things can be fixed and mitigated. And it's, like, only in, like, extreme circumstances or, like, huge fallouts, like, do you necessarily need to remove a player from, like, the game, or, fire an employee, that's just, like, becomes too toxic. But there's generally, like, you usually have, unless you mess up really big, like 2 or 3 times you mess up before you get kicked out in the big boy world.
And I think most of the time when we get to the point where we're having to, remove someone from the table or fire someone from the company, we've missed a million opportunities to fix the situation.
Yeah, because sometimes you can do it the Jack way, which is you could go about it in a gentle sort of manner and kind of corral that person back. But there's also got to be the option on the table of using the stick and saying, look, this is the problem. You're the problem. You're screwing it up. And unfortunately, some people only respond to that reactive right back at them. If they're yelling, they only respond to getting yelled back at, as opposed to hopefully we would prefer to deal with people that you can kind of pull them aside and go, hey, these are the problems we're having. This is what you're doing, and you're making other people uncomfortable, and this is what you need to change. and you'll hope that they'll learn and listen from that. But you've always got to have at least one person that can, whether we like it or not, be the authority figure. And sometimes you just have to good old fashioned put your foot down and say, hey, you're wrong and you're screwing this up and this is why. And if you don't stop, you're getting booted. End of discussion, and go forward from there.
Absolutely, Bob. That was that I would usually start off. I was in the Army before, and I didn't like, having to yell at people every single day or whatever. And so, like, hey, go talk calm to him, explain the situation, like explain like this, like if it's not a dire situation, it's not a like on the spot, like just get your shit together. Like, hey, like this is why I need you to do this in this particular math. Like, just take that extra 5 minutes or whatever to explain it if I got the time. And then if it doesn't get addressed, like those things don't get fixed, then yeah, you have to be able to put your foot down. Be like, okay, well, you did this. I'm gonna file this paperwork, and it's gonna reflect negatively. You're not gonna get promoted or whatever it's gonna be because of the circumstances that you put yourself in. And so being direct, like being straightforward is extremely important, whether it's in a calm way or a like more aggressive way. But like you said, some people don't get it unless you get to that point where it just doesn't click in their head.
Solid.
Yeah, some people only respond to the aggressive or the yell back, unfortunately, or if they make a mistake, it's always they learn from it, but it's got to be a pretty big mistake for them to learn from it, unfortunately, and typically learn the hard way.
So I'm gonna cut us off here because we're at the hour, and I want you guys to do your outros. But it sounds like the secret sauce to clearing poison is earned respect, whether it's through using the stick or the carrot. As long as you have the person's respect in some form or fashion, you can fix the well. Right? Is that kind of where everyone's at? Your water can be cleared definitely, as long as you can earn the respect of who you're dealing with, right? And sometimes it's not worth earning the respect of some people. We all understand that some people are just too far gone. The poison is too strong. Whatever you want to call it, it ain't worth it. And you move on. So I think this is a wonderful conversation, but unfortunately we've run out of time, and I want to give you guys all a couple minutes to tell people where they can find you, what you do, who you are, all that fun stuff one more time before we do our outro music and all that fun stuff. So this time we're going to start with ladies first.
Oh, fun. That's me. So yeah, thank you so much. This was a fascinating, awesome conversation. I am Suzanne Jabour. I'm a grief educator. You're going to find me at SuzanneJabour.com.
All right. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And luckily her name is spelled out right there, so you can't mess it up like I did 4 billion times. Bob, what about you?
All right. I am a motivational speaker and coach. You can find me at whatbobthinks.com and What Bob Thinks on, shameless plug, on all of the socials that, there's like 1,000 of them now. I'm on I guess the big 4 or 5, and that's about it. But I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. By all means, reach out and say hello.
Fantastic. And no shameless here. That's part of the fun, is the plugging part. Jack.
Yes, I'm Jack McCarthy. I do online events and custom games and events all around the world. My name is best place to find me is probably at jackmac401, or you can find me at greatteambuilding.com. That all those emails will get forwarded to me if need be. But thank you so much. Awesome conversation.
And
yeah,
fantasy games, right? That's the other place people
and Fantasy Escape Games. Fantasy Escape Games is our friends and family facing brand. Great Team Building is the corporate facing brand. They are the same company, the same offerings, just a different coat of face paint on them.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
Very cool.
All right, and then for our stuff this week, code for 10% off the website is still Shamrock 907, all caps, because it's still March somehow. That'll get you 10% off. We have stuff and things coming up, but not for a couple weeks. So nothing super worth mentioning. We do have exciting news. We will be at the Midnight Sun Festival, but that's not till like June, so that's 3 months away. We're super excited about that. There will be some other events in between now and then, we promise. Next Friday, we are doing a community event in the group. We're watching Starship Troopers as a community. We're going to be commentating on it. It's going to be fantastic. Everyone's the peanut gallery. We're going to be talking over the movie the entire time. If you want to be part of that, jump in the Discord on Friday. We'll be in the Heroes Hall, all that fun stuff. Let's see what else do we have coming up. Monday and Wednesday we have our live play games. So Monday is obviously the new Avatar. We have a new character coming in to replace our person that unfortunately cannot be with us anymore. And then on Wednesday we continue fighting the gods as we have been doing for the last 10 sessions. So, that's all that we have. Younger, do you have anything else? Oh! I didn't bring him. Dang it. We got a new product. It's getting cheesy up in here. We got cheese dice now.
Nice.
I will post pictures eventually. I haven't taken any good ones yet, but we have them. So if you're excited about cheese dice, they are, what are we doing? $20 a product, right? They come in super cool boxes. And check them out when I post them later.
Unfortunately, they're not edible because it's not real cheese.
It's not real cheese. Don't. They're
Never
not.
mind. I
They're
gotta
not.
go.
They're not soft or squishy. Yeah. Don't do that. Anyway, thank you guys so much.
Really
Stick
sad
around
you
for-
have to tell people that.
Look, there's some dice that we sell that you can 100% put in your mouth because they're squishy and great. We just don't suggest it for children.
You need to sign up now, Rook.
All right.
You're fired. Toxic.